I woke up to a text from her. A stranger sent screenshots of my husband calling me, his financial plan, and his real home. He mocked my panic attacks, bragged about how I paid the bills, and bet on when I'd finally snap. She said I deserved the truth before she left too. When I showed him, he just smirked. She's just mad I didn't pick her either. Then turned back to the TV until I built a Dropbox and sent it to everyone he owes. I woke up to a text from an unknown number at 6:17 am. I remember because my phone buzzed 3 times in a row, the kind of vibration that feels urgent. The message started with, "Hey, I don't know you, but you deserve to see this." Attached were screenshots, dozens of them. My husband, Ryan, in full color, calling me his financial plan. In another, he said to her, "She's good for the bills and cooks well, emotionally useless though." Then one that broke me, "She has panic attacks sometimes. It's kind of funny. I bet she'll crack by the end of the year." I read it over and over, thinking maybe it was a fake. But his number was right there, the same tone, the same stupid slang he used. The woman, her name was Jessica, said she'd been seeing him for almost a year. She told me he'd promised her that once he secured his future with me, he'd move in with her. But apparently, she'd found out he was also seeing someone else. She said she was done and wanted to warn the next person he was planning to ruin. My hands shook so badly, I dropped my phone twice. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the man sleeping next to me, my husband of 6 years, and felt something go cold and sharp inside my chest. When he woke up, I showed him the screenshots. His reaction. He glanced at them, smirked, and said, "So, she was mad I didn't choose her either." Then he picked up the remote and turned the TV back on like it was just another Tuesday. I stood there watching him laugh at some dumb sitcom while I was trying not to scream. That's when something in me shifted. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just went quiet. Because I realized I'd been living with a man who didn't even see me as a person. He thought he'd broken me. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I was already building something behind the scenes. While he laughed on the couch, I opened my laptop, created a new Dropbox folder, and started uploading everything. Every receipt, every financial statement, every photo, every text, every little breadcrumb that would prove who Ryan really was and what he'd been doing. And I already knew exactly who I'd be sending it to first. To the one person who could burn down everything he'd built while I walked away clean. When I met Ryan, I was 26, newly promoted at a marketing firm in Nashville, still trying to convince myself that confidence and exhaustion were the same thing. He was the funny guy at a coworker's birthday dinner, charming, quick with jokes, and effortlessly confident. He made everyone laugh, but he paid attention only to me. He told me I looked like I belonged somewhere expensive. I thought it was flattering back then. Now I realize it was probably the first red flag. We started dating fast. Within 2 months, he'd basically moved into my apartment. At first, it was small things, a toothbrush, a hoodie, then his PS5, then half his wardrobe. He said he hated his roommate and that it was temporary. I didn't mind. I liked having someone there when I came home. He always talked big about business ideas, real estate, crypto, side hustles. I never saw any of them last more than a few weeks, but he made failure sound like strategy. Meanwhile, I was working 50-hour weeks, covering rent and groceries, while he focused on building something long-term. Still, I made excuses. I told myself he was ambitious, just figuring himself out. He proposed after 2 years. It wasn't romantic. No ring box, no speech, he just said, "We should get married, it makes sense financially." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He saw I hesitated and added, "Babe, you know I love you, right?" And I did love him. Or at least I loved the idea of him, the version I'd built up in my head. The wedding was small. He complained about every expense, said my family was too showy when my mom insisted on paying for catering. I remember him pulling me aside that night, whispering in my ear, "Don't let them spoil you. You're not like them." It sounded like love, but it was control. After we got married, the real Ryan showed up. He'd quit his latest job to freelance, which somehow turned into him playing video games and betting on sports all day. He'd text me jokes about my panic attacks whenever I got overwhelmed with work. Once, during an argument, he said, "You're lucky I'm still here. No one else would put up with your moods." I should have left then. But I didn't. I kept paying bills, cooking dinners, and convincing myself that things would stabilize, once his projects took off. Then last winter, I noticed he'd started locking his phone. He said it was for security. I told myself I trusted him, but sometimes when I walked into a room, he'd flip his phone face down or close tabs too fast. I ignored it. I didn't want to be that wife. Until Jessica's text hit my phone that morning. And suddenly, every little moment, every excuse, every weird smile, every late-night work call made sense. That Dropbox folder, it was going to be more than just evidence. It was going to be leverage. Because if Ryan thought I was emotionally useless, he was about to learn how dangerous I could be when I stopped caring about him. That same morning, after his smug little TV moment, I called in sick and stayed home. Ryan thought nothing of it. He left around noon to meet a buddy about a business thing. His words. The second the door closed, I grabbed his old laptop from the closet. It was one he used years ago when he still pretended to work from home. He'd once bragged that no one knows how to clear data properly, meaning he didn't. He'd been right. His Gmail was still logged in. At first, I expected normal trash, spam, subscriptions, maybe some messages with that woman, Jessica. But what I found was worse. There were threads with multiple women. Some of them he'd flirted with. Some he'd apparently sent money to. One email chain caught my eye because the subject line said, LLC documents for joint account. It was from a bank. The account had my name on it. At first, I thought maybe it was something he set up for us. But as I scrolled, I realized it wasn't joint in any real sense. He'd forged my e-signature on forms to make me a passive member of an LLC he'd created, one that apparently received consulting payments from a few small businesses in town. Except those payments didn't go toward anything we owned. They went straight to him. And because my name was on the documents, if taxes were ever checked or anything shady happened, it would be my problem. I remember sitting there, cold all over, scrolling through PDF after PDF with my fake signature neatly copied at the bottom. He'd literally turned me into his financial shield. And then I saw the transfers. Little $500, $800 payments every few weeks to one of the women I didn't recognize. In the notes, he'd written things like consulting or design help. But when I looked up her name, she wasn't a designer. She was a woman who just moved here from out of state, and according to her public Facebook page, she was pregnant. I didn't know if it was his. I didn't even want to know. What I did know was that everything Ryan had said about me being his financial plan was literal. He had built his fake businesses, his scams, his fake life, all using my credit, my name, my stability. I stopped shaking at that point. I went numb, then clear. I opened a spreadsheet and started documenting everything. Dates, transfers, screenshots, every single thing that tied him to fraud, deceit, and betrayal. By the time Ryan came home that night, I had over 200 files saved neatly in folders. He asked if I wanted Chinese takeout. I said sure, smiled even. While he watched his game and ate, I sat on the couch beside him, acting like nothing was wrong. Because now I wasn't just a broken wife. I was a quiet storm waiting for the right second to strike. And that Dropbox, it wasn't going to Jessica anymore. I'd found someone much, much better. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's smirk. Every laugh he'd made at my expense replayed in my head. By 3 a.m., I decided exactly who needed to see the Dropbox first, his boss. Ryan didn't technically have a real job, but he did consulting work for a local entrepreneur named Mark Langston, a guy who ran a small logistics company and paid Ryan as a contractor for marketing and data support. Basically, Mark sent him checks for work that Ryan claimed to do from home. Except now I knew what consulting really meant, funneling money through fake LLCs and transferring it to other women. So I emailed Mark from my personal account. Subject line: you should see what your contractor has been doing under your company name. I included the Dropbox link, screenshots of Ryan's fake LLC paperwork, and a simple line at the end. If you want to protect your business, start with this. I expected silence or maybe denial. What I didn't expect was a reply at 6:45 am sharp. Mark's message was short. Thank you. Can you talk on the phone? We spoke that morning. His voice was calm, too calm. He said he'd suspected Ryan was playing dirty for months. Apparently, payments had been disappearing or misrouted, and Ryan always had slick explanations. Mark said he'd been collecting his own evidence too. Then he dropped the real bomb. Ryan wasn't just using my name for his side scams, he'd been using Mark's company identity to get short-term business loans. Thousands of dollars. Loans that were due soon. If Mark hadn't caught it in time, his company could have gone under, and legally, I would have been implicated too because of my partnership in Ryan's LLC. Mark told me he had enough to press charges. I told him to do it. He said, "Not yet. Let's make this right the smart way." He asked if I'd help him build a full case, if I'd provide everything in my Dropbox and anything else that could tie Ryan to the fraud. He said, "We'll get him blacklisted, bankrupt, and if possible, in jail." I said yes. When Ryan came home that night, he was all smiles, talking about new deals and clients. He had no clue that his little empire was already collapsing. I watched him eat dinner and talk about how people like me couldn't handle real pressure. He didn't realize that, by morning, he'd be locked out of all his business accounts. Because Mark didn't waste time. He sent out notices to the banks that night, froze everything tied to Ryan's LLCs. The next morning, I woke up to shouting downstairs. Ryan was pacing the living room, phone to his ear, cursing. "It's all frozen. What the F** do you mean fraudulent activity?" I pretended to be half asleep, asked what was wrong. He turned to me, red-faced, sweating, and said, "Someone's trying to destroy me." I just blinked at him and said, "Maybe you should call your real home about it." He stared at me like he finally realized something was off. But he had no idea how deep it really went or what I was planning next. Because later that day, someone unexpected texted me, someone who shouldn't have known anything, someone who said, "You and I need to talk about Ryan. He's been lying to both of us." The text that had said, "You and I need to talk about Ryan," turned out to be from Sarah, the woman who'd been getting money from him and whose Facebook said she was pregnant. We met at a coffee shop in East Nashville 2 days later, in the kind of rain that makes people keep their heads down. She sat in the corner with a paper cup, hair pulled into a messy bun, and when she looked up I realized she had the same haunted, exhausted look I'd seen in the screenshots Jessica sent. Different faces, same pattern. She didn't ask for my name or my story first. She said, "I didn't know who else to tell. He told me you were just the stable one, the one who'd pay for everything while he handled the fun part. But he's lied to both of us." Her voice was small but steady. When she said both of us, she meant Jessica and me, but there were more of us, she guessed. That made something inside me even colder. We traded details. She told me the emails started as consulting payments and then became loans and help with moving. He'd promised her support when she said she was pregnant. Instead, she got sporadic cash transfers and a lot of excuses. She'd been planning to move out of state, to leave him behind, but she didn't want to disappear without exposing him. She said she was tired of being another woman who cleaned up his mess. I told her about Mark, the frozen accounts, and the LLC with my forged signature. I showed her the spreadsheet categorizations. Transfers to her, transfers to other women, transfers that lined up with his client invoices. She stared at the rows like someone reading a verdict. Then she smiled, not because it was funny, but because she knew what to do next. "What about the baby?" I asked, because the idea of a child wrapped my anger in something else. She said she wasn't sure if his was the father's DNA. She'd been planning a paternity test anyway. That didn't matter for what we wanted now. The truth would be the tool, not the kid. We made a quiet plan. Not threats, not violent fantasies, a legal, surgical collapse. We would compile every record we had and build an irrefutable timeline. Emails, wire transfers, forged documents, screenshots, bank statements. Mark would coordinate with his attorney and the banks to freeze and reverse fraud, while Sarah agreed to bring anything she had, texts, voice notes, dates of meetings, to the table. Jessica was in, too. She wanted to testify that Ryan had bragged about treating his wife like a walking ATM. Between the three of us and Mark's legal muscle, he wouldn't have the wiggle room he loved. But the strategy that made my chest warm with a cold satisfaction was this: we wouldn't just ruin his business. We'd remove his safety nets. We'd get the banks and the IRS looking where he'd hidden things. We'd make sure any legal fallout had his fingerprints all over it. Not mine, not Sarah's, not Jessica's. We'd make him accountable in ways he'd never learned to be. We also agreed on leverage that wasn't legal but was merciless. Reputation. Ryan had cultivated a small network in Nashville, clients, friends, women who trusted his smile. If Mark pressed charges and the banks moved, the story would leak. Not because we wanted to humiliate him, but because a man who uses other people for credit and sex should not be able to keep buying new starts in the same town. Before we left the coffee shop, Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing sending that to his boss," she said. "I thought I was protecting myself, but I think I was protecting him, too, from getting what I wanted, which was to finally be free." She looked tired, but for the first time there was no apology in her voice. Walking back to my car, rain cooling my face, I felt the world tilt toward something clean and sharp. We had a plan, allies, and evidence. Ryan still had his smug smile and his TV shows, but the foundation he'd built on me and lies was starting to crack. And then, as if the universe liked theatrical beats, Mark texted me that night with a photo of Ryan's bank portal. This time, there was an unfamiliar name in the transactions. A name I knew, a name I never expected to see tied to him. The name on that screenshot made my throat close. Evelyn Turner. It wasn't random. Evelyn was my sister. You know that kind of dizzy, hollow feeling you get when the ground shifts under you? That's what hit me. I stared at the message from Mark for a solid minute before I could even type back. "That can't be right," I wrote. "It's correct," he replied. "It's your address, your husband's routing number, and her name on several transfers. Looked like repayments for something. Dates go back 6 months." 6 months. That was around the same time Evelyn started coming over to check on me because I'd been distant and anxious. She'd sit on the couch with Ryan, watching movies, telling me to rest, that she liked being around him because he made her laugh. I thought she was just trying to help. That night I went through Ryan's phone while he showered. He'd stopped locking it since the meltdown over his frozen accounts. Maybe he thought the worst was over. I opened his texts, searched Evelyn, and there it was. A thread of messages that started light. "Hey, can you tell her I called?" But then got bolder. "Ryan, you really get me more than she ever will." "Evelyn, don't say that, she's my sister." Ryan, "She's your sister, but she's not your type." There were photos, too. Not explicit, but close enough to make my stomach twist, her hand on his shoulder, him smirking. Selfies taken in our kitchen at night when I was probably asleep upstairs. He'd been playing both of us. When I confronted Evelyn the next day, she didn't even try to deny it at first. She just went pale, then said, "It wasn't like that. He told me you two were basically done. He said you didn't even sleep in the same bed anymore." I laughed, not the funny kind, the kind that sounds like breaking glass. "You believed him?" I asked. She said, "He made it sound like he needed someone to talk to." "I didn't mean," I cut her off. "Save it. I don't care what you meant." She started crying then, ugly crying, the way people do when they realize the story they told themselves won't protect them anymore. I told her I didn't want an apology. I wanted the truth. She said he'd borrowed money from her, too, a few thousand here and there, claiming he was paying off our joint debt to protect me. She'd sent it from her savings because she didn't want me to know. So he'd been bleeding both of us with the same lies. When I told Mark and Sarah, the three of us added this to the evidence pile. It made the fraud case even uglier. Ryan had now crossed into family theft, financial deceit, emotional manipulation on multiple fronts. Mark said it could make the charges stick even harder. But for me, this wasn't just about catching him anymore. This was about cutting the rot out of my life completely. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the same one where I'd first seen those screenshots from Jessica, and realized I didn't want him gone. I wanted him exposed. I wanted every woman he'd ever lied to, every friend he'd conned, every person who thought he was just misunderstood, to finally see what he really was. But to do that, I'd need something that made everything undeniable, something no lawyer, no friend, no manipulative sob story could erase. And thanks to Evelyn's guilt, I was about to get exactly that. 2 nights after I confronted Evelyn, she showed up at my door again, eyes red, shaking, clutching a crumpled envelope. She said she couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and that I needed to know everything. She sat on my couch, same spot where Ryan used to stretch out and call me too emotional. The house smelled like burnt coffee and rain. I didn't say anything, just crossed my arms and waited. Then she told me the truth. It started with Ryan calling her last year, saying he was worried about me, about my mental health. He told her I was unstable, that I was spending recklessly, and that he was afraid I'd ruin both our finances. He said he needed her help keeping an eye on me. He had used my sister's love for me as a weapon. He told her to come by the house more, to check in on me when he was working, to act like it was casual so I wouldn't suspect anything. When she'd ask why he didn't tell me things directly, he'd say, "I don't want her to spiral. You're the only one she'll listen to." And she believed him. Then, one night, when he knew I was out late for work, he told her he needed help moving some boxes from the garage. She said that was the first time he touched her, not forced, she said, just fast, confusing. He told her it was just comfort, that he felt trapped in a marriage built on sympathy and money. Every word was manipulation. He played her guilt against my trust. He painted himself as the victim in both our lives. He even told her that if she really cared about me, she'd help him keep things afloat by sending him money when he asked. Evelyn pulled the envelope from her purse then. Inside were copies of the transfers she'd made to him, his handwritten notes promising to repay her once he got the insurance payout. Insurance payout? I froze. What insurance? I asked. She blinked. He said there was a policy through your job. If something ever happened to you, stress-related, health-wise, he'd be the beneficiary. He said you didn't even know about it because you didn't read the paperwork when you signed up. My stomach dropped. I remembered the HR email from months ago about life and disability insurance enrollment. Ryan had insisted on handling it for me because I was too busy. I just signed where he told me to. He had been betting on me breaking, literally profit off it. All those jokes about my panic attacks. All those times he'd laughed when I couldn't breathe, when I thought I was dying, he wasn't just being cruel. He was watching a clock. When Evelyn saw my face, she started sobbing. She said she thought it was some kind of twisted joke until she saw the paperwork in his office. The beneficiary line was filled in with his name. He said it was just precaution, she whispered. But when I realized how much money it was, I knew. I knew he'd been waiting for something to happen to you. That was the moment everything inside me went still. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "Thank you for telling me. You can go now." After she left, I locked the door, turned off all the lights, and sat in the dark for a long time. I thought about every laugh, every smirk, every time he'd told me I was crazy. He hadn't married me for love. He'd married me for an income stream and a payout. He'd built his entire life on waiting for me to collapse. But he'd miscalculated one thing: I wasn't going to break. I was going to burn him down. The next morning, I called my company's HR department. Calm, professional. I asked them to send me copies of my insurance and benefits enrollment files for my records. They emailed them within the hour. And there it was, the beneficiary name, in Ryan's handwriting, signed electronically under my employee ID. The signature wasn't mine. That was the final piece I needed. By noon, I had a meeting with HR and the company's legal rep. I explained everything: the fraud, the forgery, the ongoing investigation with Mark and the banks. They moved fast. Within 48 hours, Ryan was removed as my beneficiary, and corporate counsel confirmed that his forgery could qualify as insurance fraud. Next, I sent everything, every screenshot, transfer, forged document, message, and confession, to Mark's lawyer. Sarah and Evelyn both signed written statements. Jessica provided hers, too. The Dropbox was no longer just a folder. It was a case file thick enough to bury him. Then, I called Ryan. I told him we needed to talk, and he came home acting cocky again, like he thought I'd finally come to my senses. He even joked, "You gonna apologize for believing strangers over your husband?" I just smiled and said, "You should check your email." He opened his laptop right there in front of me. I watched his face as he saw the subject lines. Notice of investigation, fraudulent account activity, immediate account termination. Contract violation, formal notification. Pending civil complaint then, the one from my company's legal team. Cease and desist, unauthorized access and forgery of employee documents. He went pale, then red, then silent. He whispered, "What did you do?" I said. "I stopped letting you live off me." He tried to spin it, of course. Said I'd ruined his life, that I'd overreacted, that it was all business misunderstanding. But when two uniformed officers showed up that evening with a summons for questioning, courtesy of Mark's lawyer and the fraud division, the performance ended. He left that night with just a duffel bag. No money, no accounts, no car. It was in my name, the apartment lease, the credit cards, everything tied to me, frozen, locked, or changed. Within a week, he was being sued by Mark's company and investigated for financial fraud. Sarah's lawyer filed her own claim for restitution. And because Evelyn had proof of him coercing money through deceit, she was covered under a fraud victim statute, too. I didn't have to lift a finger after that. The system did it for me, with a little help from a well-labeled Dropbox. A month later, I got a letter from Mark's attorney saying Ryan had declared bankruptcy. He'd lost his consulting reputation, every contact he had, and according to Jessica, his new girlfriends once they learned the truth. He'd wanted to make me his financial plan. He became my cautionary tale instead. As for Evelyn, she's in therapy, rebuilding trust the slow way. We're not close, but we're civil. I told her I forgave her, not for her, but for me. I needed to stop carrying his poison. Sarah had her baby in September. She sent me a photo, a healthy little boy with her eyes. DNA said Ryan wasn't the father. We both laughed when she told me. It's been 6 months since I last saw him. Some nights I still wake up expecting to hear his voice or see his phone light up. Then I remember. His number doesn't work anymore. His life's been wiped clean, except for the record of what he did, which will follow him forever. Sometimes I think about that first night, when he smirked and went back to watching TV like none of it mattered. He thought he'd get away with everything because I'd stay quiet. He mistook silence for weakness. But my silence was the sound of a woman building her revenge. And when it finally hit him, it was louder than any scream I could have made.